In the ruins of a shattered world, humanity has won, defeating the 6 demon gods who sought its destruction, even the final lord, the god of annihilation, but this was no true victory. This surface is swallowed by a sea of death and humanity is about to be wiped out. This last survivor can only curse his fate, wondering why winning feels so much like losing. Not a single hero survived the final battle, and the cursed ocean continues to rise, a final tantrum from a dead god. A voice cuts in belonging to Mad Dog Yom Seong-ha, and another, rabid dog Liu's Valent, joins the argument, followed by the weary cold dog Amir Singh. But the one they're talking to is humanity's final blacksmith, Leese-Hoon. His sharp words immediately provoke the warriors. As he identifies them as the infamous 3 hounds, they side with neither humanity nor the demons. Moving only as they please, chasing nothing but their own selfish gain, they may be nothing more than mercenaries, but in the end, they were the ones who fought beside him. Leese-Hoon wonders if things could have been different. He asks if there's anyone left to save, but Mad Dog collapses, his body completely crushed. This white-haired warrior reveals her fatal wound, and H grimly accepts their fate, cursing the traitors who left them to die. When suddenly he feels a strange sensation looking back at his fallen comrades, he laments that nothing was ever easy, gripping the handle of his hammer, a final resolve hardening his face. Their weapons are scattered and broken across the battlefield, so he plants them in the ground as makeshift gravestones. He looks on in somber silence, then turns to face the encroaching abyss, vowing this will be the absolute last time, and places a hand over his own heart, activating a strange new power. A system message confirms the bond extraction. A glowing crystal materializes in his hand, this raw essence of his own bond. His unique skill is revealed, the Blacksmith of Bonds. But the ore extracted from himself is completely empty, a vessel with nothing inside, so he decides to fill it with his tormenting regret. Raising his hammer for one final act, as the sea of annihilation roars before him, he remembers one thing about that terrible sound. He brings the hammer down on the crystal, hoping for something beyond imagination, a final, desperate strike with all his might. But the bond stone yields only a useless dagger, and he holds it up, calling this whole end boring. If he's going to die in these waves anyway, he'll end it on his own terms. A grimace of pure, unyielding defiance. A single bubble drifts past in the silence. As he accepts his own madness to the very end, sinking into the abyss, he finally understands this sound he's always heard was the annihilation sea. He closes his eyes, filled with regret, knowing if he'd acted sooner, things could have been different. Suddenly, a system window appears. This image of the weapon has manifested, and a skill. Return to origin is being discarded. His thoughts echo in the void, I'm not dead. Man yells, calling him candidate Leese-Hoon, and our boy, now younger, looks up in shock. He's in a forge 31 years in the past. But then he sees it again, this weapon that appeared right before his death. He realizes what happened. Regression. As the instructor threatens him with expulsion, he stares at his reflection, contemplating his regression, wondering if this second chance can truly change anything. But he quickly dismisses the doubt. All that matters is the opportunity right now, a small, determined smile forming on his lips as he vows to protect everything this time. His first step is to pass Babel's exam, and with a powerful swing he gets to work, immediately catching the attention of a silver-haired man, an examiner who seems intrigued by this candidate. This hammer strikes the glowing metal with precision, every blow steady, clean, and impressive. Producing a perfectly forged blade, this examiner watches from afar as an assistant approaches, who stares in absolute shock at the weapon's quality, unable to believe a candidate made it himself. This examiner smirks, impressed by this new talent, but just as he's about to pass him on the spot, our boy shatters his own masterpiece, declaring he still has a long way to go and that he can't let trash like this see the light of day. An assistant erupts in anger at the perceived disrespect. But the kid calmly asks the examiner to let him remake it, cutting off the assistant's furious rant, and the examiner agrees, ordering more materials for him. This examiner's glare silences the assistant, who scrambles to fetch the materials at once. Leese-Hoon turns to the examiner, reminding him only 40 minutes remain in the test. This examiner questions his decision to start over, but our boy refuses to submit imperfect work, intrigued. The examiner simply tells him to do his best. A fire ignites in Leese-Hoon's eyes. He knows perfect forging is impossible in this body, with so little mana, strength, and time, so he tries something completely unexpected, pouring his mana directly into the ignition stones, but Leese-Hoon just tells the others to watch. Another candidate stares in disbelief as a rainbow of flames erupts from the forge. He screams for an extinguisher, panicking, but the examiner calmly tells him to stand down. He instructs the assistant to observe the flames, to see how they flow with perfect control. This is the 5-color flame grind, a technique that saves mana with precise control. This others watch in awe, realizing it didn't explode and that the ingot itself is changing color. This examiner finally understands the method, a way to cut down time, but the clock is still ticking. This examiner thinks the first blade was good but not enough, and that Leese-Hoon won't finish this one in time. When suddenly the second blade shatters too. But our boy just gives a confident smirk. He starts again, placing a new ingot into a strange, colorful forge and pulls out a metal glowing with rainbow energy. He takes a deep breath, ready for the real work, and begins hammering the brilliant ingot. His hand starts to bleed from the sheer force of his work, and he realizes his mana protection has failed. Even so, he grips the handle tighter, refusing to waste a single second, hammering away with everything he has left. Pushing his body to its absolute limit, this clock is ticking down, only 10 minutes remain, and Leese-Hoon is drenched in sweat, completely focused, with 3 minutes left. He carefully inspects the blade, working until the final second when the examiner yells, "Stop." A faint, satisfied smile appears on his face, his bloodied, trembling hand clenching into a fist. He holds up his masterpiece, the five-color flame blade. As a system window declares it a high-grade weapon, this blade's description reveals its incredible potential, shocking the other candidates into silence. Leese-Hoon calmly asks them to check the details, and the assistant can't believe it. Another candidate screams in pure joy, having passed the exam. But the examiner quickly tells him to be quiet as the scene shifts to Professor Kim In-cheol's office. He sits across from Leese-Hoon, a serious look on his face, asking if our boy finally submitted a worthy sword, and Leese-Hoon confirms that he has. For now, this professor notes that he still doesn't seem satisfied, deciding to be blunt with the young blacksmith, and advises him to withdraw his application entirely. He admits Babel's reputation is strong, but its smithing department is weak. Something Leese-Hoon already knows all too well. He remembers the future. Babel's smithing department fails, and Vulcan Academy rises. He cuts the professor off mid-sentence, declaring that Vulcan won't be the best because Babel, the academy he's joining, will take that title. His bold declaration echoes against the academy's grand architecture, a promise of the future he intends to build. This professor challenges him, saying he'd have to become top of the faculty, asking if Leese-Hoon even knows how that's decided, and our boy explains the selection process perfectly. Babel Academy is split into three main faculties: combat, support, and technical, with dozens of departments under each one, and the top of faculty is the single best talent among them all. This professor looks at him not as an examiner, but as a fellow blacksmith. This examiner advises him to go to Vulcan Academy, calling it the best path for his future. Leese-Hoon smirks, respecting the man's selflessness, but the examiner says the environment doesn't matter because Leese-Hoon declares Babel will become the best. This examiner chuckles at his bold claim, finding his arrogance strangely compelling. He extends a hand, offering his support. Their hands meet in a firm shake. A system window confirms a bond has been formed, and Leese-Hoon immediately begins extracting it. A glowing piece of ore materializes in his hand, identified as a high-grade fire-storing metal. Later that night in a quiet neighborhood, Leese-Hoon sits in his room examining his prize. He notes the ore's quality is good, but its size is small. His bond extraction skill creates new ore from relationships, but with a low bond level, it's not very useful yet. He checks his own stats, which are brutally low, but he can't complain about this second chance. His eyes narrow with focus. There's no need to rush. He has plenty of time to crush the Demon Legion, an enemy that threatens not just humanity but entire stars, the 6 demon gods who nearly caused extinction. To stop them, he must secure future knowledge first. He's cleared the first step of his plan when a system notification suddenly chimes, announcing he's reached bond level 1 and unlocked the bond engraving skill. 1 week later, he arrives at Babel Academy, wandering the halls, a little lost, until he finally finds the smithing room. He enters, announcing himself as a new cadet, only to find 2 men already waiting for him. One of them taps his pen, noting his relaxed attitude, while the Vice Dean, Michael Barmuth, scolds him. Professor Kim points out he still has 10 minutes, but the Vice Dean insists it's about his attitude. As the professor defends him, Leese-Hoon sees the friction. Finally understanding why he was warned away from Babel, this Vice Dean glares, clearly unimpressed. His eyes burning with silent judgment. Leese-Hoon, however, remains completely unfazed, which seems to throw the Vice Dean off balance. Our boy feigns a bit of confusion, asking if everyone was already waiting for him. He carries himself with a bold confidence, taking a seat without being invited. Just then, another man is addressed as the department head, and Leese-Hoon's eyes widen in shock. A woman with intense red eyes apologizes for being late, and Professor Kim In-cheol is completely bewildered, demanding to know what she's doing here. Leese-Hoon remembers hearing she worked at Babel before, but he never imagined she was the faculty head. She is the S-rank hero, weapon eater eun-ha, a hero whose unique skill lets her devour weapons for power, and in his past life she was a loyal customer for years. He flashes back to a dark moment in the rain, where a defeated eun-ha admitted her regret. Leese-Hoon from the future stood before her, her face etched with pain and defeat, while he watched on with a heavy heart. A silent, tragic memory from his past life snapping back to the present. Professor Kim calls his name, pulling him from his thoughts, and announces the exam explanation is starting. He announces the total exam time is 90 minutes, and the 2 of them must craft a companion weapon, but there's a specific condition. They are restricted to using alchemic smithing only. He gestures toward a room full of materials, telling them they're free to use any ore they find. Their work will be judged by faculty head eun-ha. And with a final command, he prepares to start the test. This next exam begins, pitting Leese-Hoon against a smug new rival. He ties his apron, his mind focused on alchemic smithing, when his opponent mocks him for just staring at the materials. Leese-Hoon turns slowly, a dangerous glint in his eye. He confronts the blonde smith, who scoffs in return. An examiner intervenes, calling the rival by name. Hans Barmuth. He warns Hans to stick to the exam and avoid taunts. As Hans backs down, Leese-Hoon recognizes the family name, realizing this candidate is the examiner's son. This resemblance is suddenly obvious. Michael and Hans Barmuth. Leese-Hoon can't help but smirk at the ridiculous situation, and Hans knows he's been found out. A commoner with low mana versus a noble with incredible power. Hans reaches for the finest materials, declaring the result of this exam is already decided. In the observation room, the judges discuss the materials, noting the water element ore is difficult to refine, but Hans's father dismisses the concern as outdated. While Professor Kim points out the tight 30-minute time limit, this Weisstein smirks, certain his son can synthesize anything in time. Hans begins his work, a complex magic circle forming around the ore. A resonance synthesis technique far beyond a freshman's level. This professor finally understands the scheme. This entire test was rigged from the start to favor Hans. Meanwhile, another candidate, a red-haired woman, selects her materials. Leese-Hoon presents his chosen materials, hydrogite and fire-red stone, a strange combination. An examiner notes their high-capacity fire ores. While his rival wonders if the choice is a challenge, he scoffs, knowing Leese-Hoon lacks the mana for it. Believing this match will be an easy win, but Leese-Hoon's focus is absolute. System window appears, bond engraving activates, letting him use the fire-joined bond stone, equipping it directly onto his right arm. His entire arm erupts in controlled flames, a sight that the rival dismisses as a pointless trick. This fire swirls around Leese-Hoon's hand as he levitates the ores with his mana. The stones begin to glow and resonate, a confident smirk spreading across his face. This examiner's watch as both smiths begin their work, and one calls Leese-Hoon's method foolish. Predicting the mana will run wild and explode, a massive vortex of fire erupts around Leese-Hoon, while his rival works calmly with his own element. This sheer firepower shocks the examiners, but from the flames, a weapon takes shape. This system announces the crafting is complete, a fire-stacked sheath. This judges can only stare in stunned silence. This judges can't believe what they're seeing. A system window confirms the weapon's creation, and Hans is completely floored by the speed of the synthesis. He knows elemental mana is supposed to run wild, making him question his entire understanding of smithing. Just as Professor Kim screams out a desperate warning, Hans loses control of his own elemental energy, his eyes wide with panic as the power surges. This magic stone in his hands begins to crack before erupting in a massive explosion of blue light. Later that afternoon, inside the exam hall, this floor is littered with the shards of his failure. Hans stands bruised and defeated, while Leese-Hoon looks on without a scratch. Professor Kim explains the complicated situation, calling the entire outcome unfortunate. Hans clutches his injured arm, humiliated, knowing he lost by forfeit without a real fight. This Weisstein proposes they void the test due to injury, but Professor Kim argues it was Hans's own mistake. Michael Barmuth twists his words, accusing him of prioritizing the test over a student, and he begins to build his case. Stating the fastest resonance time on record is 5 minutes, he points at Leese-Hoon, questioning how a freshman could do it instantly, heavily implying that our boy must have cheated. Alchemic smithing isn't about killing the ore but drawing out its very essence, a technique Leese-Hoon already knows from the future. He plays dumb when the Weisstein confronts him, who smirks, accusing him of cheating. He claims a commoner couldn't possibly craft a rare weapon, and Leese-Hoon can't believe what he's hearing. Suddenly, eun-ha slams her hand down, agreeing it's ridiculous. This Weisstein, thinking she's on his side, moves to disqualify Leese-Hoon, but her cold silence catches him off guard as she walks right past him to the crafted sheath. She picks up the weapon, her focus absolute, holding it close, her voice trembling. A single drop of drool escapes her lips. She points a shaking finger at Leese-Hoon, begging for just one taste of the weapon. This other judges can only stare in utter confusion. Later that afternoon, back in the city, Leese-Hoon walks alone, reflecting on the day. He inspects his work, noting its flaws, still feeling it's not quite perfect, but he smirks, remembering the Weisstein's rage. Then a thought stops him in his tracks. The name Barmuth. He racks his brain, trying to place it, and a dark memory begins to surface. A flashback reveals a past victim's story. How a mana backlash from a faulty weapon ruined their life. Leese-Hoon listens with a heavy heart, realizing the blacksmith responsible was Hans Barmuth. His original goal was to guide the three hounds, and a confident smirk spreads across his face, knowing he can stop Hans and prevent that dark future. This scene shifts to the Borsapa faculty meeting room. A professor shouts, outraged by a new proposal. They want to make Leese-Hoon the top student. Eun-ha stares him down. Asking if he's against it, this man quickly backpedals, calling it advice. Weisstein Barmuth reminds her she's new to her position, but she remains completely unmoved by the pressure. This other professors urge a more careful review. While Professor Kim defends Leese-Hoon's incredible mana control, still, one of the faculty members isn't convinced. Eun-ha declares the weapon was only a fraction of its potential, and that's what makes this so exciting. She issues a challenge to the room. If they can't accept her decision, she will resign. This story then cuts to the history of the world, how the Demon Legion swamp rose to corrupt all life, and how Babel Academy was founded to fight back. This ascended emperor promises the new students they too will become legends. A speaker addresses the new students, declaring it is their duty to go forth. This is the ascended emperor, Ludwig Schubert. Leese-Hoon knows the man isn't as nice as he looks. An announcer takes the stage, calling the top cadets from each faculty forward. Leese-Hoon never understood the pride in academy ranks, but now he prepares for the demonstration. A smirk crosses his face as he finally gets it. This announcer hypes up their opponent, a machine with a glowing red eye. It's an automaton Model 9 golem, powerful enough to fight a C-rank hero. Leese-Hoon sizes it up as a close combat type. This combat faculty is up first, represented by their top student, Jake Myers. This students and the golem take their places in the arena. Leese-Hoon recognizes the name. A swordsman-turned-brawler, Jake Myers raises his fists, ready for the fight. This automaton's visor glows with menace, and it lunges forward with a devastating chop, narrowly missing the combat student. Its arm glows with power for another strike, forcing Jake to duck and weave, barely evading the flurry of attacks. Jake Myers slides across the floor, ready to counter, and with a confident smirk, he declares it's his turn. He leaps towards the golem, fist cocked back, his eyes blazing with fierce determination. His punch lands with explosive force, shocking the students in the audience. This impact shatters the automaton's armor, and Leese-Hoon remembers Jake's tragic future. A talent like this only appears once a decade, making him wonder how he only reached a rank. Jake gathers his energy for one final blow, delivering a devastating kick that shatters the machine. This golem's head lies broken on the floor. Jake wipes his brow, smiling after a good stretch. This announcer is completely at a loss for words. Calling it an incredible performance against a C-rank threat, Jake waves to the crowd. A true top student, Leese-Hoon notes he set the bar extremely high. This announcer introduces the next participant, in now Erica. Leese-Hoon thinks the pressure is off now. Remembering Erica is from a powerful Japanese clan, she became a famous S-rank hero in his past life, but her story ended in corruption and tragedy, so he knows to keep his distance from her. But as she walks by, she glances back at him. This announcer reveals the golem is now armored, making it even tougher for the next cadet. And now she calmly lifts a mysterious birdcage, her eye glowing as she commands her familiar to Geo. And a massive black crow bursts from its prison. It soars over the arena, dwarfing the golem, leaving Leese-Hoon to wonder what he's seeing. This automaton looks up, tracking the bird, and immediately shifts into a defensive stance. Leese-Hoon knows that armor will be tough to crack. But the crow begins to change in the air, its form shifting into something more menacing. It becomes an armored knight of the sky, diving down with incredible speed and unleashes a powerful, swirling attack. This blow smashes through the golem's core, shattering its reinforced armor instantly. This fight is over in a single decisive strike. As a flaming crow returns to the summoner, this crowd is absolutely stunned by the display. A man in the audience calls her Erica, looking annoyed. And now it's time for the final demonstration. Cadet Leese-Hoon takes the stage. This announcer calls for the technical faculty's top student, and demonstration supervisor Ludwig Schubert watches silently, noting how rare it is for the smithing department to take the top spot. Beside him, faculty head eun-ha observes the proceedings, confident that her student will be just fine. This crowd buzzes with excitement. Their expectations soaring, Leese-Hoon grips the hilt of his blade, stepping into the arena with quiet determination. A system window scans his weapon, revealing its stats to all. These students are shocked to see a freshman with a rare-grade weapon, though some whisper it looks a bit plain for its rank. From the stands, Vistein Barmuth smirks, feeling lucky, convinced the faculty head position is finally within his grasp. Eun-ha's expression remains cold and unreadable. As the announcer introduces a D-rank golem, Leese-Hoon cuts him off, demanding they bring out Model No 8 and equip it with armor. This announcer freezes, completely baffled by the request. He knows Model 8 can fight B-rank heroes, and adding armor is insane. He tries to protest, claiming it's too sudden to prepare, but a new voice speaks as an automaton steps into the arena. A man with gray hair presents the fully armored golem, ready for battle. This new opponent takes its place. Leaving the announcer speechless, this man locks eyes with Leese-Hoon from across the field, a challenging smirk playing on his lips, giving the kid a simple instruction. Geo raise some hell. Next up is the magic faculty's top student, but the announcer seems to falter for a moment before declaring the next match has begun. This new challenger smirks with confidence, promising to live up to everyone's expectations. He draws his weapon, igniting it with 5 colored flames, and takes his stance before the towering golem. A student in the crowd roars with excitement, while another scoffs, calling it a cheap trick. He dismisses the kid as a mana-starved brat, unaware of the incredible control required for this technique. This student channels his power, injecting crimson fire into the sheath, his eye glowing as the storage completes. This automaton raises a hexagonal energy shield just as the student unleashes a devastating crimson slash. His weapon's skill, Wildfire, detonates all the stored mana, forcing the compressed 5-color flames to grind together and erupt in a single cataclysmic explosion. This faculty members can only stare in disbelief. While the announcer feels a sudden wrongness in the air as the dust settles, the student stands alone, calmly sheathing his blade. He lets out a sigh, wondering if he overdid it. As a massive fissure splits the arena floor, this announcer trembles, unable to find his words. This mid-evaluation ends with the arena completely destroyed. And faculty head eun-ha walks down a quiet hall, where the magic student Se-hoon waits for her on a couch. She enters the room, apologizing for the delay, but he stands and apologizes for wrecking the auditorium. She looks at him, completely baffled by his words, and Se-hoon asks if he isn't here to be scolded. She waves her hands dismissively, saying that's not it at all, looking surprisingly flustered by the whole situation. Just then, his stomach lets out an embarrassing growl, and she clears her throat, trying to regain her composure. She makes him a staggering offer, 10 times the market price, asking to purchase his 5-color flame blade and sheath. Se-hoon is stunned into silence by her proposal, and a system window suddenly appears before him, announcing a bond has formed with eun-ha. He's shocked, realizing this happened much sooner than in his past life. but he quickly recognizes this as a golden opportunity, activating a skill called bond extraction. This system begins extracting the bond from the unsuspecting faculty head, creating a rare, high-grade material known as greed iron. A glowing red orb materializes in his hand. She leans in asking if he'll sell, but he bluntly refuses, leaving her confused as a voice calls from the door. A man named Kim In-cheol enters, announcing the award ceremony is about to begin. Someone off-screen asks to take Cadet Leese-Hoon, and faculty head eun-ha reluctantly agrees. Leese-Hoon tells her he'll see her later. As he's escorted from the room, this scene shifts to the heart of Babel Academy. This old main building, Marok Manor, Leese-Hoon follows the gray-haired man down a grand hall where an aide warns him to mind his manners. Reminding him the headmaster is on another level entirely, our boy just smiles, telling him not to worry. A voice from within the office calls out his name. It's the legendary headmaster Ludwig, the Ascended Emperor. Leese-Hoon recognizes the immense power of a full clearer. Ludwig praises the weapons from the demonstration, but says the performance itself was lacking. Leese-Hoon was prepared for this kind of critique. As the headmaster offers him 2 rewards for his talent, 2 rewards. The offer catches him by surprise. He asks for items to raise his mana and memory. A golden light glows from the headmaster's hands, materializing into a strange, glowing artifact. He presents 2 heroic-grade materials to Leese-Hoon, who is stunned by their incredible rarity. He smiles, already seeing how he can use them. Ludwig asks if the rewards please him. Leese-Hoon inspects his rewards, calling them perfect. And as he walks through a grand hall, someone watches him, wondering why the kid received 2 powerful items. An old man explains he has the capacity to handle them, noting that Leese-Hoon feels like an old soul in a young body, a depth that even he cannot fully comprehend. This scene shifts to the academy grounds, where Leese-Hoon enters his new classroom. A blonde student named Hans declines a lunch offer, claiming he's meeting the 3rd year's top student, a connection he proudly flaunts to his friends. Just then, another student spots Leese-Hoon at the door, but our boy's intense gaze stops him cold, and Leese-Hoon walks right past them without a word. His glowing eyes carry a silent warning, leaving the blonde student completely rattled, though another classmate misreads it as submission. But Hans clenches his fist, furious at the nobody. Before their instructor enters the room calling for order, he confirms everyone is present for the first class, and decides to start with a practical demonstration. He reveals a box of projection alloy, a material incredibly sensitive to mana, which erupts into flames when he channels his energy, instantly forming into whatever weapon the user imagines. Leese-Hoon recognizes the work of a top artisan. But he senses something more from the bond stone. An instructor explains the blade is highly sensitive, reflecting the user's soul, which is why they're called doppelgangers. These students are tasked with creating their own for display, and a blonde student scoffs at the academy's grandstanding. He forges an ornate, glowing rapier, but Leese-Hoon sees no real talent in the room. Then the instructor calls his name, and our boy decides not to hold back. He pours his energy into the projection alloy, resolving to go all out for this test. This scene shifts to the main building's exhibition hall, where a crowd has gathered for the smithing display. Students mock the hype around a mere freshman, whispering among themselves in the gallery, but then they see it. A monstrous fusion of blades, which they immediately dismiss as a lucky accident. A sharp-eyed female student disagrees, and the blonde student beside her feels the same way. He knows this creation doesn't even begin to capture Leese-Hoon's true self. Back in the forge, a hammer strikes with perfect timing, creating a blinding flash of light, as another student watches in absolute awe. This impact of the blow shakes the entire room. This observer notes his timing is absolutely perfect, leaving the instructor wondering what he could possibly teach him, so he decides to just skip Leese-Hoon's turn entirely. With the demonstration over, the class is dismissed, but Leese-Hoon stays behind, examining his creations. His mana still swirling with focused intent, he looks over the blades, clearly unsatisfied, and prepares to smash them to pieces once again. But the teaching assistant suddenly calls out to him. He explains the weapons can't be broken, as they're sold to fund the academy's budget. This assistant asks what's wrong, his body or his mana, and Leese-Hoon admits it's his physical limits. He needs to refine a powerful material, but lacks the stamina, so the assistant suggests a simple solution. Use buffs instead of just raw training. This idea clicks, a simple fix he never considered in his past life. A way to overcome his current body's weakness. He bows, genuinely thanking the man for the advice, but as he turns to leave, the assistant stops him, offering some smithing advice in return. Use less mana, more focus. Leese-Hoon walks away, taking the critique to heart. This assistant is left stunned by the exchange, realizing a freshman had just coached him. This scene shifts to a station detailing Babel's open curriculum. He's given a strict condition for his freedom: fail 3 times and he's expelled on the spot. This train doors hiss open at the ritual arts department, where he's immediately met by a girl named Erica. Her companion aggressively tells him to get out of the way, but Leese-Hoon calmly tells him to move instead. These 2 men bristle at his defiance until Erica steps forward, asking where he's headed. He explains he's looking for a minor in ritual arts, and she surprisingly offers to show him the way. Her friends protest, reminding her of a meeting, but she tells them to go. They insist the seniors are waiting for her, but a single cold glance tells them she's not interested. She and Leese-Hoon walk away, leaving her entourage stunned. As they walk, she asks what he's looking for exactly, and he specifies a buff to enhance physical ability. one that won't interfere with his smithing. She suggests barrier arts, which he thought was purely defensive. She pulls out a small black book, saying it depends on the user. As a complex magic circle flashes around her, she hands him the book, telling him to try and tear it, but he finds it impossible to rip. Realizing it retains its form but hardens under pressure, she smiles, explaining it's a perfect technique for his work, and offers to introduce him to the professor. Member of her family, he remembers the invitation he was given, a challenge from the girl named Erica, who's stunned he broke her family's barrier technique. Leese-Hoon coolly thanks her for the tip, then tells her to have lunch with her bodyguards. Her aides rush to her side, asking if she's okay, but the shattered remains of her invitation lie on the ground. She stares after him, a new resolve in her eyes. This scene shifts to the Department of Ritual Arts, where students whisper about Erica walking with Leese-Hoon, noting they were also seen together at the exhibition. Leese-Hoon internally scoffs at the rumors. Knowing that if she liked him, a bond would have formed, she leads him into a forest for a barrier construction test, where another applicant looks completely lost. Leese-Hoon calmly wonders if it's a treasure hunt. While the other student complains about the task, as Leese-Hoon steps forward, he senses a hidden barrier and shatters the illusion with a single step, revealing two stunned instructors who declare he's passed. This other applicant is left utterly baffled by the result. Elsewhere, a professor named Robert Perry is briefed on the situation, learning that Erica has taken an interest in Leese-Hoon. He sees a photo of them, realizing why she joined his lecture, and groans that her presence has tripled his class enrollment. A shadowy man reveals a special request. A new test will be added this year, the Soul-Dazzle Labyrinth, a barrier that twists the senses. Without ritual knowledge, one is hopelessly lost. Yet Leese-Hoon broke through on pure instinct. An instructor announces the first test is complete. A red-haired student eagerly volunteers for the next part, seeing this as his chance to impress a girl named Erica. But the second test is a complex mana barrier. As the challenge begins, he slams his hand down, revealing a web-shaped barrier with a spider at its core. This spider senses mana and flees, regenerating the web endlessly. This student realizes he lacks the mana to win by the book, so he opts for a brute force speed attack. He finishes in just over 2 minutes, earning a half-hearted compliment from the instructor. One by one, the other students fail the test and are relegated to the basic class. Then the instructor calls for Erica now, who calmly prepares to begin. Her spiritual form touches the web with a single finger, and the entire structure begins to resonate, leaving the other students stunned by her speed. She dismantled the entire ritual pattern in an instant. A display worthy of a top-tier student, this instructor notes her time was good but not perfect. And finally, he calls for Leese-Hoon to the instructor. He looks completely unremarkable, deciding he'll have to see for himself. But instead of starting, Leese-Hoon just crouches down, leaving the other students wondering what he's doing. He realizes this barrier is similar to a material he knows, a substance that regenerates unless refined all at once. This instructor is completely confused by his actions, but Erica calmly tells him to let him be. And he reluctantly agrees, trusting her judgment. Leese-Hoon has a new idea for this old problem. He channels fire directly into one of the strands, sending the flame hurtling toward the core, and the spider shatters in a burst of light. This barrier vanishes, leaving only a ring of fire behind, and with a simple touch, he's done. He smiles, realizing he can now refine that difficult material. He stands, walking away from the dying embers, leaving the entire group speechless. An assistant calls out the time, 7 minutes and 45 seconds, but the instructor dismisses the time, knowing he'll be faster next time because he didn't just break the barrier. He created a whole new formula for it. Erica watches him, her expression unreadable, as the instructor fears what he'll forge with this new power. An official email goes out to the smithing faculty. This assistant wonders who will volunteer to supervise Leese-Hoon. Instantly, his phone blows up with applications. But none are from Weisstein Michael's bitter faction. As he prepares to choose someone, a new message arrives, one that leaves him completely stunned. This faculty head herself will be observing the test. In the workshop, Leese-Hoon is greeted by an unexpected visitor, and a red-haired woman introduces herself as the faculty head. He accepts her presence, ready to give it his all. This first stage begins, refining ink-heavy darkness, using the incredibly difficult dark curtain process. He seals the material in a lightless container, using only his mana to separate the impurities within. It's a process akin to rebuilding the material from scratch, and the faculty head watches with keen interest. He decides on a quarter-sized piece, the smallest he can manage. Then he moves on to the second stage, gathering crimson flame mana in his hand. His entire body is wreathed in a fiery aura as he carefully sifts out the perfect temperature. This flame stabilizes into a green guardian wildfire, and he begins the third stage, hammering the material relentlessly. This faculty head realizes he must be in immense pain, wondering just how much he suffered to master this skill. Leese-Hoon begins his work with a surge of power, and as the sun sets over the academy, Erica waits patiently, letting out a tired yawn, her vigil continuing into the night. 4 hours into the refinement, his grip remains steady, as the ink-heavy darkness begins to change. Its volatile distortion finally coming to a stop, he melts the finished material and pours it into a mold as Erica watches in disbelief, completely baffled by his unorthodox method. But Leese-Hoon just smirks with fierce intent, using a barrier-breaking formula to construct a mana circuit inside, a brilliant flash of light marking his success. A system window announces the creation of the ink spider bracelet, and he even acquires a new skill, Dark Spirit Master. This rare bracelet absorbs mana to increase its weight, and Leese-Hoon knows he's pulled it off, but the intense moment is broken by a sudden noise. As Erica's stomach growls, leaving her blushing and flustered, Leese-Hoon takes a moment to recover from his exertion. Confirming the resonance she felt was from his work, he notes the items aren't strong but could have a set bonus, then apologizes for not giving her one, offering the leftovers instead. She activates a unique skill, soul-melting furnace, and declares the byproduct is surprisingly tasty. She describes the taste as fried batter crumbs, and Leese-Hoon realizes he's used to someone else's preferences. Thinking this might make raising her bond level easier, she makes a suggestive comment about the meal in front of her, then quickly asks about his plans for the new weapons. He tells her they aren't for sale. Much to her surprise, he's saving them for his upcoming subjugation classes, but promises her the first piece he's willing to sell. With the forging session over, she asks if he's ready to leave, telling him the staff will handle the cleanup. But just as he stands, his energy gives out and he collapses right into her arms. He admits he completely misjudged his stamina, so she offers to take him to his dorm, asking about heights. He smirks, saying he has no fear at all, then suddenly lifts her into his arms instead. With a burst of power, he leaps from the window, carrying her through the air as they fly away. He's stunned by the power she gained from the spent molds. Her red hair blazing like a comet's tail, he smiles, realizing how much has changed since his regression. But someone else is watching from below, a black-haired girl wondering where Leese-Hoon is. She's been waiting to give him an invitation, and a forum post reveals she's been standing there for 3 hours. This forum speculates she's waiting for Leese-Hoon again, sparking outrage and demands to take the post down, but Leese-Hoon just dismisses it. Figuring she'll find him later, a new instructor introduces himself as Ricaros Miles, then announces a race to the training center. Last one runs 20 laps. This entire class erupts into a sudden sprint, leaving Leese-Hoon stunned by the unexpected change. He has no choice but to join the frantic rush. Our boy struggles to keep pace with the others, arriving dead last at the training grounds. He accepts his punishment without complaint, as the instructor mocks his rock-bottom stamina. Ricaros then gathers the rest of the class, explaining why this theory class is now a practical one, because of the infamous Flame Blade Hunts, a group that targets blacksmiths who forge powerful fire swords. Leese-Hoon recalls the case was never solved in his past life, as Ricaros stresses the need for self-defense. While the class begins sword training, Leese-Hoon knows he needs a new plan, and it all starts with building his stamina. He glances at the bracelet he forged, testing its strength. A device that absorbs mana to increase weight and grants a gravity skill. His stats have already improved, but he's determined to get stronger. This instructor calls him over, but he collapses from exhaustion, and as he falls, he activates his new skill, Burst Detonation. This instructor sizes up Leese-Hoon, telling him to demonstrate his swing. Leese-Hoon knows the bracelet will make this difficult, but he has a technique in mind. He lunges forward with a powerful strike. While other students mock his slow speed, but the instructor sees the truth. His form is perfect. His only flaw is his impatience. As he presses the attack relentlessly, suddenly Leese-Hoon's eyes glow with power and the world seems to warp around them. This instructor is completely stunned, finding a blade suddenly at his throat. He can't believe he's being intimidated by a smith, demanding to know where he learned such a skill. Leese-Hoon panics, having just invented the move. A memory flashes of an old master, who offered to teach him swordsmanship to pay a debt. He quickly lies, saying he copied heroes from videos. This instructor, impressed, offers to teach him for real, even writing a recommendation for a special class. Leese-Hoon arrives, looking exhausted, only to find the new instructor yelling at another student. This is the retired S-rank hero, swordbreaker Ma Guangsu, and Leese-Hoon recognizes him as a gambling addict from his past. A stern instructor demands to know who he is, learning Leese-Hoon is the top student from another faculty. But to him, our boy looks completely unremarkable. He turns to his other prospective student, offering him a spot if he can defeat Leese-Hoon. His rules are simple: a one-round match. First clean hit wins. With a sharp gesture, the fight begins, and the blonde student lunges forward immediately, but Leese-Hoon remains perfectly still. Using a relaxation technique to maximize his flexibility, this instructor knows the textbook counter is grappling. And the blonde student moves to do just that, as the instructor scoffs at these mind games. But Leese-Hoon suddenly dodges the grab, slipping inside his opponent's guard in an instant. He's surprised by the other student's raw strength, but uses it against him, beginning a throw, whispering a command, Burst Detonation, and his ink spider bracelet glows with power. This bracelet amplifies his throw with explosive force, making Leese-Hoon grit his teeth from the recoil. This blonde student is slammed to the ground, defeated in a single brutal move. Lying on the floor, Leese-Hoon smirks, saying he was just faster, leaving the instructor stunned by that final attack. This instructor orders everyone else out, but Leese-Hoon flips the script. He landed a hit, so he should be the one getting taught. He points out the shame of a top student losing to a lesser cadet, and the blonde student, Ricaros, accepts the instructor's offer to train him. Ricaros is absolutely ecstatic, bowing deeply in gratitude as the instructor dismisses him. Now alone, the instructor turns to Leese-Hoon, demanding to see the sword technique he used on Ricaros. Leese-Hoon prepares himself, his focus absolute, and unleashes the technique with incredible speed, but the instructor stops the blade with his bare hand. Leese-Hoon is stunned, his first strike kill effortlessly neutralized. This instructor calls the idea good, but the execution sloppy. Revealing a fatal flaw after the initial move, he promises to refine Leese-Hoon's raw technique into something proper. Leese-Hoon asks if this means he's in the class now, and with a simple bow he prepares to leave. This instructor is taken aback by his curtness. As he leaves, Ricaros runs up to him. Surprised that he's still waiting around, this blonde student has something for him, an invitation to a gathering of noble families, this very same one Erica tried to deliver earlier. Ricaros insists it's a thank you gift for getting him into the class. And Leese-Hoon finally accepts with a small smile. Leese-Hoon walks through the academy, considering his minor subjects, thinking of alchemy or enchanting when he bumps right into someone and catches a red-haired girl before she can fall. Her eyes sparkle as she asks if he made the bracelet on his wrist, and Leese-Hoon simply asks what she'll do if he did. Her expression turns intense, offering to enchant it for him. A system window suddenly appears, confirming a new bond with Rhea Clodal. A once-in-a-generation enchanting prodigy, Leese-Hoon can't believe this genius called his masterpiece, rare grade. As Rhea sits at a cafe completely absorbed by the bracelet's design, she pulls at her hair in frustration, a true eccentric, explaining the problem isn't dislike but overwhelming potential. There are too many formulas to choose from, so Leese-Hoon offers a solution, telling her he has even more materials. This mention of resonance sends her into a state of pure bliss. Their meeting is interrupted by a spiky-haired student, who identifies Leese-Hoon as the top first-year smith. This newcomer demands a private word, looking serious. Rhea objects, recognizing the man as one of Erica's underlings. Leese-Hoon tells him to say what he needs to write here, and the man demands an apology to Erica for the torn invitation. Our boy coolly replies that she told him to rip it, but the underling counters that was before he got an invite from the Myers family. Leese-Hoon wonders if Erica was behind that invitation too, but the man insists it was his own idea. A girl with glasses scoffs at the student's words, who calls Leese-Hoon a lapdog for some young Master Myers. Infuriating the student with his dismissive attitude, he warns Leese-Hoon not to get delusional because Babel is filled with far stronger people. Leese-Hoon calmly asks a simple question: if the student is just talking about his own story, this taunt lands. And the student erupts in a furious rage, forcing Leese-Hoon to pull the girl out of harm's way. As spectral wolves lunge from the shadows, he quickly deduces the illusions can deal real damage, leaving the attacker stunned by his quick analysis. Leese-Hoon reveals he's already broken the dagger used for the spell, then activates his greed iron engraving, completely devouring the expensive weapon into dust. He smirks, mocking the student's predictable rage. His skill, greed iron, consumes metal to create ore, and he follows it up with burst detonation. Leese-Hoon lunges forward with explosive speed, landing a single decisive blow to the gut, and the student collapses, utterly defeated. This girl with glasses looks at him, completely intrigued, asking for a recommendation from the enchant department. She gushes about ancient enchant studies and a senior named Rhea Clodal. As they talk, the defeated student stumbles away, vowing revenge. A guard is surprised by a freshman's skill, asking to see his dagger, but the person before him is Lady Erica, and he nervously hands over the blade. She sees her reflection, vowing to report this directly to the family head. Examining the dagger, she finds it covered in anti-theft enchantments. Realizing Leese-Hoon created a counterskill based on her own rituals, she reevaluates his potential S-rank smithing and rank ritual aptitude. Back in class, Leese-Hoon gets a notification. Bond has formed with Erica. He wonders if she was watching his earlier fight but focuses on his compensation. 10 new daggers to work with. He's bored in class, having already mastered these basic theories. This professor finally cuts the lecture short, ready for practical work. He demonstrates how mana can alter a metal's very form, explaining this is the key to a weapon's diversity. His scarred hands display several complex metal shapes, stressing the need to understand a metal's potential. Today's lesson will be practicing metal deformation. As assistants hand out highly sensitive ingots to the class, this task has a 10-minute time limit, and the other students immediately struggle, unable to control the metal, but 2 students remain perfectly calm, their hands on the ingots. Leese-Hoon and the blonde student finish at the exact same moment. This professor allows the 2 of them to proceed to the next stage, projecting a complex mana array for them to replicate. This blonde student smirks, confident he can finally win this time. This instructor presents a complex mana array, as the blonde student shows his own creation to Leese-Hoon, absolutely convinced his work is perfect. This instructor calls him out by name, Hans Barmuth, ordering him to restore the ingot to its original form, but the array crumbles in his hands, completely wrecked. This instructor explains his method was wrong from the start, reminding him to understand a metal's true potential. This wasn't deformation, it was degeneration, a critical lesson Hans is forced to accept. This instructor glances at Leese-Hoon, wondering if he understood, but dismisses it as luck until he sees our boy's hands move, and the ingot transforms into an impossible shape. This other students are in disbelief, prompting the instructor to ask Leese-Hoon for a demonstration. Leese-Hoon quickly lies, blaming the specially tuned ingots, and the instructor seems to accept his excuse, but inwardly he's disappointed by Leese-Hoon's apparent ignorance. He recalls the legendary blacksmith Lee Kent's, creator of the ultimate technique, Truth of Iron. He doubts himself, thinking Leese-Hoon couldn't possibly have achieved it. And as our boy walks away, he's given a simple warning. After dismissing the class, the instructor calls Leese-Hoon back, offering him a special entrance gift, a rare, top-quality Crimson Flame jewel. This instructor explains the jewel's power, a permanent boost to his Crimson Flame, and Leese-Hoon accepts with a grateful smile. This professor then offers him a spot in a special course, Origins of Equipment, which Leese-Hoon knows is heavily funded. He recalls his past life, never hearing of this professor, which means his future was likely cut short. But for now, Leese-Hoon accepts the offer, casually mentioning this will be his fourth minor. They shake on it, sealing the deal with a crackle of energy. A new system window confirms the bond, extracting fire-joined iron from the professor back in his room. Leese-Hoon meditates on a new theory that the human body itself can be forged, while others stick to one mana type. He is different, holding the crimson flame jewel ready to absorb it. His goal is to build a new mana circuit, using his own body as the anvil and his will as the hammer to forge himself anew. A notification confirms his crimson flame has leveled up, and he's gained a new S-rank skill, Spirit Forged Divine Body. His stats have all jumped significantly, triggering a memory of a past failure, a red-haired woman scolding him for giving up. He smirks, determined not to repeat that mistake. Leese-Hoon stands in his room, vowing to leave no regrets this time. This next day at the academy, it's time for the final project, and an instructor warns this test will define their entire semester. The students rush to their forges, ready to begin, but Leese-Hoon finds his work flawed. His body lagging behind his mind, he knows there's no time to take it easy, and after some work, he holds up a single, acceptable blade. He doesn't have time to perfect the others, deciding it's better to make one masterpiece than many flawed items. He focuses all his energy into the single sword and steps back from his finished creation. A memory flashes through his mind. The sound of the world ending, a sound that always heralded his greatest works. He's carved pure killing intent into the very steel, unlocking a new skill, White Light Style. This system confirms the White Light Greatsword is high-grade quality compared to another student's work. His blade is a masterpiece, and he feels his past life's power slowly returning. This other students can only stare in defeat, one even considering quitting. This next morning, Leese-Hoon has a meeting planned, and Rhea Clodal is surprised he wants to see her work. He's curious about her fundamentals, but she teases him, saying her workshop isn't easy to find. Leading him far out into the quiet countryside, they finally arrive at a remote hardware shop, her secret workplace. This girl with glasses calls out for her grandma, and a voice answers from the back of the shop, revealing an older woman who's clearly not amused, who immediately asks if Leese-Hoon is her boyfriend, unimpressed by the flimsy kid standing before her. But he introduces himself as the top first-year smith, and the woman Helena puts them to work on a mountain of orders. Leading them into the main workshop area, where Leese-Hoon immediately senses her hidden skill, wondering why she's running a simple hardware store, and the girl shows him an enchantment palette, noting it has far more colors than the standard set as she explains her job is restoring damaged enchantments, a perfect way for her to practice without cost, dipping her brush into the glowing magic powder and painting a complex formula onto a simple pan. But Leese-Hoon can tell she's been in a slump. A former top student who kept failing her exams, but now she sees the problem and knows how to fix it. And he admires her intense concentration, taking a moment to look around the workshop when he spots a box of materials resonating with mana, and Helena challenges him to try carving it himself, letting him pick any material from the pile, and Leese-Hoon smirks, ready to accept her challenge. Leese-Hoon picks up a simple kitchen knife, and the shop owner asks if he's sure about that one. But he sees the blade's perfect, where a true swordsman's tool. He knows he can sharpen this one to its absolute limit, and begins to hone the edge with expert precision. This woman watches in disbelief, amazed by his skill. Suddenly, the girl with glasses bursts in, celebrating her own work, only to be met with the woman's cold stare. Leese-Hoon teases her for getting shown up by a junior, and the older woman smacks her for the backtalk. He presents the perfectly sharpened knife to the woman. Confidently stating he'll do even better next time, she dismisses them both, telling them to leave, and the girl drags Leese-Hoon out of the shop alone. The woman stares at the flawless blade on the counter. A man in a pinstripe suit suddenly appears at the door, asking about a backed-up order for kitchen knives. She silently judges the swordsmanship professor's side hustle, but he spots the knife Leese-Hoon just finished. He picks it up, a look of confusion on his face, asking if she sharpened it while drunk. Or if an assistant did, she simply replies it was the freshman. Leaving him stunned, this freshman who just enrolled this year did this. She thinks to herself that this kid is something else entirely. As they walk, Leese-Hoon learns the truth. The shop owner was a former professor. Leese-Hoon asks about the professor's story, but Rhea says many professors have left over the years, a fact Leese-Hoon can't just ignore. She changes the subject, asking for feedback on her enchantment. And he praises her fundamentals before adding a critique. She's far too narrow-minded in her approach. He knows she saw better methods but ignored them, and his words hit her hard, a painful truth. Leese-Hoon decides to show her what he means. Telling her to watch closely as he has little time, he begins his lesson with an analogy explaining smithing is like dropping a stone in water, while enchanting is carving its shape on the surface. It's an art form with a dreamlike quality. And he prepares to demonstrate his Crimson Lotus, infusing the simple knife with a fiery red energy. Then he switches to his White Light Style, a technique that reinforces from within the blade. He explains you can split the enchantment into layers, and as he does this, this knife slices cleanly through the air itself, its energy flowing along the invisible Crimson Lotus pattern. It's not a true enchantment yet, but for Rhea it's a revelation, a genius at work. She shouts his title. Desperate to borrow the knife, Rhea begs to remake the item for him, but Leese-Hoon offers her a set of tools as well, and she explodes with joy, thanking him ecstatically as our boy waves her off with a smile. A system window confirms the new bond with Rhea. Leese-Hoon heads off to meet one of the three hounds. When he notices a girl following him closely, she's tagging along, and he asks what if he says no, to which she replies she'll just watch from afar, and he gives in. An aura swirling as they enter, this system displays the new high-grade materials he's acquired. As they arrive at the massive martial hall for the ranking matches, their commentator introduces herself as Professor Lan Feng, and now it's time to introduce the fighters. First up is Akarquif, a top fourth year from the S-rank Myers family, this reigning rank champion for 3 years running, this one who actually cleared the hero tower known to all as the Holy Swordmaster. Leese-Hoon watches as her first challenger is introduced, a third-year spearmaster, successor to a cultural heritage art, and Leese-Hoon smirks, thinking they finally meet. This mad dog, seong-ha, a fiery explosion of power rocks the arena, sword and spear clashing in a blinding flash, as seong-ha swings his flaming spear in a deadly arc. In the arena, a blonde swordswoman smirks with confidence, parrying a fiery spear strike with a brilliant flash. And her opponent can only grunt in frustration. His hand gripping the flaming shaft of his weapon, she stands calmly within a swirling ring of fire, deflecting another powerful overhead blow. From the stands, Leese-Hoon critiques the spearman's form as subpar, noting the biggest problem is the weapon itself. This spear wielder lunges forward with glowing eyes, but his attack is stopped cold inches from her throat. He stares at the tip of her rapier, defeated, and is forced to admit his loss. This victor offers a simple compliment on his work. As the announcer declares Arya Myers the winner, a post-match interview is announced, but the loser has already left. Arya just laughs, already thinking about her next fight, while her opponent walks away from the arena in shame. Leese-Hoon watches him noting the kid is taking it hard. He decides to leave as well, not interested in this type. Muttering that the guy just pisses him off, his footsteps echo as he turns his back on the match, leaving his companion wondering why he's so angry. She questions if he's found an interesting freshman, and on the arena floor, Arya glances toward the stands. Sensing that a new, powerful presence has just appeared in a park near the Martial Hall, a lone student meditates, and Leese-Hoon recognizes him immediately. Seong-ha. He hopes to get the Bond Stone before this timeline's hero falls, recalling the warrior he once was, a pillar of the final strike force, a man who sacrificed everything to stop a demon god. Seong-ha is surprised to be found, and he recognizes Leese-Hoon as the top of another faculty. Leese-Hoon just wants to talk, confused by the cold reception, but the other student simply tells him to leave. He tries to explain it's for his own good, but Seong-ha's disdain is clear. He hates weaklings, especially those who rely on cheap tricks, until Leese-Hoon says a single word: blacksmith. Our boy smirks, finding this version of the hero quite tame, and realizes talking is off the table. As Seong-ha sees he has no intention of backing down, Leese-Hoon offers a single final warning, threatening to end the legacy of his opponent's spear style. That's all it takes for Seong-ha to lunge forward, but Leese-Hoon is ready, clenching his fist, activating his bond engraving skill, Greed Iron. He effortlessly blocks the fiery punch, leaving Seong-ha stunned by the defense. Leese-Hoon's appearance shifts, his hair turning red, and his opponent finally recognizes the true power before him. Leese-Hoon declares this is the end, as he meets the spearman's attack head-on, sending a shockwave through the courtyard, and Seong-ha stumbles back from the impact. Leese-Hoon stands completely unfazed by the blast, and his opponent can't believe what just happened. Realizing Leese-Hoon somehow stole his mana trails, our boy just watches his opponent's rage build, noting that Seong-ha is about to snap. This is the same temper that led to a future massacre, a memory of the warrior he's destined to become. This mad dog is about to be unleashed, but Leese-Hoon's skill is fading fast, forcing him to change tactics and break him instead. Suddenly, another force intervenes, a new student catches the punch mid-swing. And Seong-ha recognizes him as Jake Myers. Jake asks if he knows the top of Borsipa's faculty, and Seong-ha just glares in silence. After a quick dismissal, Jake excitedly grabs Leese-Hoon, telling him to just come along and not say anything weird. Alone again, Seong-ha reflects on his loss of control. Ashamed he nearly dishonored his master's legacy. As they walk, Jake scolds Leese-Hoon for the reckless fight, but our boy just scoffs at the idea of dying. A system window confirms the bond with Seong-ha, but this version is far too soft for Leese-Hoon's plans. When a blonde student approaches, asking about his hand, and the boy laughs it off, claiming his hands are tough. But Leese-Hoon is already focused on something else. This student asks if he spoke to his sister, Arya Myers, and Leese-Hoon admits he called her annoying, sending the brother into a complete panic, because now Arya has taken an interest in him, having overheard his comment from the stands, which is exactly what Leese-Hoon wanted all along, but her brother warns him not to take it so lightly, as Leese-Hoon correctly guesses she's petty and scheming, leaving the poor guy completely flustered. Wondering what she could have done to earn such dislike, and Leese-Hoon recalls the holy swordmaster Arya Myers, a hero from his past whose sword was nothing special. Until the day she vanished without a word, replaced by a wielder of a demon god's power. Back in the present, he gives a simple reason. He just doesn't like her face, before turning to leave without another word, leaving her brother utterly baffled by their history, just as his phone buzzes with a new message. A A text from Leese-Hoon making him the new middleman, and another from his sister asking for a favor. Leese-Hoon walks alone through the quiet streets, and the next morning he's in a lecture hall at Babel Academy. He's already regretting how hard he pushed seong-ha. While another student discusses an upcoming exchange meet, suddenly a tiny professor on a wheeled chair bursts in, introducing himself as Reese Doba, their new instructor. His students recognize him as a notorious lunatic. And he begins by handing out evaluations and budgets. He calls students up one by one until he finally reaches the last name, Leese-Hoon, but the professor has surprising news. There's no budget for him yet because his submitted piece was so exceptional it's being sold at the second year's open auction. Leese-Hoon accepts this, trusting his other professor's judgment. This lesson begins on the topic of residual mana, and the professor calls for his special assistant to come in. It's none other than seong-ha, the spear master. This entire class is stunned by his appearance, but the professor quickly gets things back on track. He explains residual mana comes in two forms, a basic charged type and a self-generating independent type. This independent type is far more difficult to craft, because its mana core has no fixed standard, so today they'll start with the simpler charged type, and seong-ha demonstrates by unleashing his fiery power in a flashback. The professor explains the volatility of fire mana, using seong-ha's flame wheel technique as an example, a display of control that leaves his classmates in awe. This diminutive professor then announces their next assignment, a project with a specific yet unrevealed theme. He dismisses the class to the forge, telling them to get moving, and two students see this as their chance, a rare opportunity to speak with the famous seong-ha, but the hopeful underclassman is coldly shut down, leaving the others dejected in his intimidating presence. Back in the present, seong-ha calls out Leese-Hoon's name, demanding to know what he knows about him. Leese-Hoon explains the power scaling of the flame wheel spear, noting that seong-ha is holding back his true potential. The spearman turns, demanding he get to the point, and Leese-Hoon reveals a secret. He once reached 7 wheels. Seong-ha is stunned into silence, wondering how he knows something he never told anyone. Leese-Hoon says his own talent with fire revealed an issue, that Seong-ha's power is held in reserve, never fully unleashed. Desperate for an answer, he asks if Leese-Hoon knows the cause, and our boy confirms he has a guess, but he sees no reason to tell him for free, forcing Seong-ha to ask for his terms. Leese-Hoon lays out his first condition, a fair price for all advice. Leese-Hoon gives him an ultimatum. Decide by the forge. After a moment of hesitation, Seong-ha agrees, but only if Leese-Hoon can prove his claims. A challenge our boy happily accepts. Later that afternoon, they arrive at the Academy's forge, where the professor and Seong-ha watch him work. This spearman questions his reckless method. No blueprint, no planning, just a simple ratio of fire and dark element ore. He tosses the materials straight into the flames, a move that should disperse all the attribute mana, but Leese-Hoon's plan is to heat them just enough. Using a technique called heat-ring binding to hold the mana, this professor is stunned by his advanced skill, and Leese-Hoon knows this display is just for Seong-ha. He tells the spearman to watch very closely as he pumps the bellows to intensify the heat. He forces the opposing manas to balance each other, and both the professor and Seong-ha finally understand, seeing the perfect fusion of fire and darkness in his eyes. Seong-ha recalls being banned from using his second attribute, a decision that caused his power to drop from 7 wheels to 5. Leese-Hoon demonstrates the result, 5 black flame wheels, and Seong-ha explains the dire stakes of his situation. His clan will strip him of his heir status if he's below 6 wheels, but Leese-Hoon reveals he can't go back to his old way because his dark mana is now completely out of control. Seong-ha impatiently asks about the instructor, realizing he needs a solution in one day or he's finished. And he grabs Leese-Hoon by the collar, asking if he'd do anything to keep his heir status. Leese-Hoon's eyes glow as his plan comes together. A system window reveals Seong-ha's bond, an ore of fire and dark mana. With a confident smirk, Leese-Hoon says they'll start by changing his weapon. They enter a private training room for top-tier students, and Leese-Hoon accesses a control panel to change the scenery. This room glitches and transforms around them, becoming a perfect replica of the Eun-ha gate. Seong-ha explains his master sent him this training simulation. As Leese-Hoon pulls out a small, glowing red orb, he presses the orb into the shaft of the spear, a material perfectly suited for fire and dark mana. And in a flash, the modification is complete, but now Seong-ha holds 2 spears, feeling completely awkward while Leese-Hoon explains this suits his 2 attributes. His instructions are simple, left hand for flames, right for darkness. And Seong-ha closes his eyes to concentrate, unleashing a torrent of fiery wheels around him. But the power sputters and explodes uncontrollably. Leese-Hoon explains he let dark mana leak into his left hand, revealing his 2 attributes are tangled and fighting each other. He promises that once he masters both, his power will return. Seong-ha trains with his fiery spear, a whirlwind of flame and deadly precision. Leese-Hoon notes his rapid adaptation, a chance to see his future self's potential. Our boy analyzes his every move, from muscle twitches to his center of gravity, even sensing the mana flowing from his spear. When questioned, he claims he's just gathering data, all to build him the perfect weapon. Seong-ha scoffs at a first year's work, but Leese-Hoon just changes the subject, asking if he truly wants to be an heir. This spearman explains it's his master's wish, a duty he must fulfill as a disciple. We learn his master is Jin-hyun, an S-rank hero who adopted and raised him as a son. This master's influence is absolute, and their bond level has already reached 3. Seong-ha finally asked why he's helping, and Leese-Hoon just gives a knowing smile. His true goal lies in the 6 demon realms, lands over him by monstrous legions. He plans to conquer them all, needing Seong-ha's strength and resources. He confirms he's a mercenary, not a charity. Seong-ha makes his demand, help him become head of the gate, and in return, he'll kill demon gods for Leese-Hoon. He holds the bond item, asking if Leese-Hoon is sure, but our boy's mind is made up, his dark power swirling. As a system window confirms the bond is activating, this scene shifts to a public sparring arena, where an instructor from Yeomwa Gate greets the young master. He's brought 2 disciples to spar with them, calling Seong-ha the most outstanding candidate for the next master. But the spearman coldly reminds him the position isn't decided. This instructor offers a smirking, insincere apology, and when he tries to start a simple skill check, Seong-ha refuses instead. He declares he's applying for the 7-wheel promotion, and the instructor can't believe this idiot is aiming so high. In a quick flashback, he's given secret orders to intervene. And now he tries to talk Seong-ha down, but gets cut off. Seong-ha taunts him about losing his job, forcing the enraged instructor to agree to a domain duel. This rules are simple. A raw power clash, win or draw to pass. With the term set, the duel begins. Seong-ha summons a pair of ornate red blades, and the instructor scoffs at the crude-looking weapons until a surge of power leaves him stunned. He screams that Seong-ha is using forbidden dark mana, but the spearman just smiles, ready for their powers to clash. This instructor snarls that he'll regret this, unleashing a torrent of his own flame wheels, but Leese-Hoon just watches from the sidelines. As the instructor's attack is suddenly consumed, chewed apart by a monstrous jaw of dark mana, this instructor's spear begins to crack under the pressure. Before shattering into a dozen pieces, he falls to his knees, utterly defeated. Seong-ha simply calls the display crude, explaining that with the ceremony done, he's now the official heir. Leese-Hoon asks how he becomes the Gate Master, a title that requires 8 wheels and the instructor's approval. Seong-ha is confident he can force their approval through duels. And Leese-Hoon's faith in him is absolute. Our boy smirks, reminding him it's time to pay up. And Seong-ha agrees to provide whatever he needs, but Leese-Hoon already has another request. Seong-ha looks at the temporary spear, amazed by what Leese-Hoon forged in just a few hours. He walks off, demanding a weapon worth using next time. A system window pops up. Their bond level is now 2, and their relationship is defined as a transaction. This scene shifts to a packed auction house. An auctioneer begins the sale for second-year smithing students, and Leese-Hoon sits in the crowd, knowing his title drew them all here. Elsewhere, a man in charge notes the increased attention as an auction begins with a special quality check, using a cloth woven from an S-rank white tiger's fur, a material that shatters inferior blades on contact. This test is designed to expose weapons with low durability, and the first cadet's sword is brought up for sale. In the audience, Leese-Hoon watches with a smirk, explaining the true nature of the white tiger's power. Its fur copies a weapon's edge, draining its durability. His companion realizes his sword is at a disadvantage, but Leese-Hoon knows this is a blatant trap for him. He's confident it will only work if he forges his blade improperly. And soon his white light greatsword is called to the stage. This glowing blade descends upon the legendary cloth, striking the fabric with incredible force. And the tester stares in utter disbelief, as the sword rests perfectly intact, defying all expectations.